And welcome to our Anatomy of the MCAT session. We are very, very thrilled that you're all here with us today. My name is Petros Manassi. I'm the VP of Test Prep and Tutoring, overseeing all things MCAT here at Med School headquarters. Super thrilled that you've joined us, and looking forward to the conversation for the next hour to really talk about what is the MCAT, not just what the sections are, which we'll do, but really kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive under the hood, a little dissection of this exam, figuring out really what it's testing, what it's, why it exists, and what you can be doing, quite frankly, to boost your scores and get yourself ready and get started studying for this test. So with that said, we've got a couple chats in here, so would love for you to introduce yourself, love to know where everybody is chiming in from. I'm here in Northern California, where we're still waiting for summer. I feel like we got teased with summer for a couple days and then it disappeared, and that's that. So we'll see when it shows up. I should say spring, really, because it's still supposed to be spring. And then we've got a second chat which says ask a question. So feel free, as we're going through this tonight, to ask your questions. So this is a session that's obviously designed for you. So I want to make sure that you leave here with questions answered, and kind of a little bit of a plan of what you're going to be doing as you move forward. To give you my background, I've been involved in some way, shape, or form with MCAT prep for the last 25 years. So I've been an MCAT teacher. I've overseen the curriculum for the development of MCAT programs. So done it all as far as MCAT is concerned, and looking forward to imparting some of that history, that knowledge onto you here tonight and get your questions answered as we go through. So that all being said, we really can't have a conversation about the MCAT without understanding what the MCAT is in fact testing us on. So looking at this exam, as far as the sections are concerned, right? You can't really have a conversation about the MCAT without knowing what's actually being tested on it. Bottom line is, it's a long exam, right? You're going to be there for about 7.5 hours total as far as your seat time is concerned, because there are breaks that are going to come between each of the sections. There are 4 sections on the exam. There's a lunch break. I mean, there is no other entrance exam that's out there that has a lunch break built into it. The MCAT has a lunch break built into it. It's a 30-minute lunch break, so it's not like you're going out for anything fancy, but there is a break in the middle of the day for you as far as this the test is concerned. The thing with the MCAT, though, is while it has these 4 sections and the titles of the sections are relatively self-explanatory, right? It's the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. It's the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. It's funny, the biological and biochemical foundations, I feel like they wanted to say biological systems, but then it wouldn't have worked. So they had to say living systems, which are effectively biological systems. The psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. That's the name of that section. Here's the thing. All 3 of the sections that involve science involve biology, right? So this is where the MCAT starts to veer away from how you have learned the sciences as an undergraduate. And this is really kind of the first thing that you have to account for, the first thing that you need to start thinking about differently as far as your preparation is concerned. You are going to be tested on general chemistry. You are going to be tested on physics. You are going to be tested on organic chemistry. You are going to be tested on biology and on biochem. But it's all going to be in the context of biology. So what we mean by this is, traditionally in a physics class, you would have learned about fluid dynamics. So here's an example for you. Fluid dynamics, right? You learn about the velocity in which the fluid is traveling. You change the cross-sectional area, how that's going to change that velocity, how pressures could change, right? You're learning all the various things about fluids. You get to the MCAT and they start testing you about the circulatory system, and they start asking you all these questions that are related to physics. And that throws a lot of students off because you say, you know what, I haven't seen it this way. But it's in fact the exact same science, right? We think about force and work and muscles, right? That is a very clear connection that happens and happens quite frequently as far as the MCAT is concerned. So when you're thinking about this exam and thinking about how you're going to prepare for this exam, the first thing that you really, really have to, and you can write this down, kind of make a mental note of it, make a physical note of it, what you really, really have to be thinking about is how the sciences are integrated with each other. How are they connected? Because that's what the MCAT is going to do. It is going to force you to think about the sciences in an integrated fashion that you have not thought of, nor have ever needed to think of in that way. And that's where it becomes very, very different. It becomes this kind of necessity for you to really be thinking about kind of what the connections are between chemistry and biology, right? We think about things like the sodium-potassium pump. That sodium-potassium pump is a biological system, but really what's being created with the sodium-potassium pump is a concentration gradient, right? The literal design of the sodium-potassium pump is to change the concentrations outside and inside of the cell in order to create a concentration gradient. And then you think, okay, concentration gradients, you always travel down the concentration gradient. So you have to start kind of imagining and thinking in this world that is very, very different from what you're used to. The other thing about the MCAT as an exam, and please ask your questions, I know some of you might be actually taking this exam relatively soon, is that it asks you to do a lot in a relatively short amount of time. And you know, in my experience, if I were to give everybody an MCAT and not put a time constraint on it, inevitably 99% of students would perform better on the exam than when they have a time constraint. So it's not just about knowing the information. It's not just about knowing how to take the test. It's also about being able to execute in the amount of time that the test is ultimately giving you. So as you're studying and preparing for this exam, the mistake that I have seen lots of students make is trying to do things under timed conditions in the early stages of your preparation, right? The early stages of your preparation really need to be the stage of mastery. How well do I know the content? How well can I apply the content? How well can I answer questions and get them correct? And then start focusing on doing that same sequence, but faster and faster and faster so that you can complete the section in the amount of time that you've ultimately been given. So timing becomes a factor with this exam, in addition to the necessity to connect all the dots. And then there's the endurance factor, because you're not just going in and taking the Chem Phys section, then you got to come back and do the cars. And we'll talk about cars there in a second. Then you got to do the biochem. Then you got to do the psych-soc section. And by the end of it, you are going to be tired. So part of your training needs to also be to build the mental and physical endurance to, one, be able to switch from one topic set to another topic set relatively quickly. Quite frankly, forget about the previous section and the previous questions. This is something that happens a lot where, you know, test takers start thinking about the cars section while they're taking the biochem section, or they start thinking about the Chem Phys section while they're taking the car section. Like, oh, that question, I totally, now I've remembered that Gibbs free energy, whatever it might be, should have been this, and you can't go back and change it, right? You can't go back. So kind of mentally blocking out that information is going to be absolutely huge for you as you're going through, this exam, and as you're going through kind of taking this test and preparing for this exam. Is really being able to build that endurance and that mindset to really be able to compartmentalize, to be able to separate things out as you're working through and as you're taking as you're going through the various sections. So I don't see any questions yet. So and I'm like 99.9% confident that there already are questions out there in your minds. So please, please, please let us know when when you're doing that. I'll put a question up here, which is when are you planning on taking the MCAT? So I'm curious to see where everybody is. You can just type into the chat where that is. So let me know where you're at as far as that is concerned, so we can get a better sense of where everybody is at as far as this test is concerned. So that's open. So please put your answers in. I'll close the poll up here in a second once I see a good number of you have responded. But if you've got questions about anything on this before we move on to the next bit of this, let me know. This is a session for you, right? Like, I can talk about the MCAT all day, so ask your questions, as it were. Alana has a great question. What are the common red flags I should notice when researching which MCAT course programs I would like to purchase? I know this isn't a must, but for my learning style, I believe a course will really benefit me. Here's what I'll say is that, every program that's out there is going to say that they're the best. Every program out there is going to say that, more students have prepared students, or, more students have been prepared by them, et cetera, et cetera. So we now offer test prep services. So we offer, and right now, as part of our launch, I've assembled a phenomenal team of top scorers, but more importantly, teachers who can really, really break down tough concepts into, really digestible bits of information and really train you on kind of what those core skills are. So currently today, at some point in the future, we will also, that's the reason why I'm here, is we will have courses, we will have programs. But I think the thing to be looking out for is how tailored it is to your individual needs. So, with courses, you are in a class with 100 plus students, the teacher's on camera, they're teaching, you can ask questions, an off-camera teacher is going to answer those questions for you, but a lot of the work is going to be really on your own. And you're not going to have that kind of support, if you will, on your own. That's why we're, and the program that we're going to be building is going to be a little bit different. So more to come in the future on that one. But the way that our tutors work and the way that our tutoring programs work is it's all bespoke. And what bespoke means, because I realize I use that word a lot, but not a lot of people use that word. Bespoke means custom tailored to each individual student. So literally, deep dive analysis into where your strengths, where your weaknesses are. You have a conversation with me to get things started on that. And then pairing you with the right tutor who's going to be able to address those needs. And then, you're the driver essentially, where, this is what I'm going to need. We'll do the analysis, figure out kind of what's right for you, and making sure that you are staying on track, being held accountable, kind of what those right goals are, if you will, as it were. So Emily put a link in as far as our different tutoring services are concerned. So feel free to check that out and let us know what that is. You can schedule some time to talk with me one-on-one. So I'd love to have a conversation with you, kind of figure out what the right thing is for you, based on your learning style, based on kind of this is, it's for everybody, right? Based on what it is that what your needs are. The thing that I would caution everybody about is score claims. So it's really easy to create a score claim and say, we guarantee this many points of an increase. But if you read the real fine print, you got to do, this many 100 different assignments, and each assignment has so many questions in it. And even with score claims, right, they'll say, on average, our students go up this many points. But then you read the real fine print and it's like, well, there were 40 students who fulfilled these very specific criteria that were set. And that's really, I can slice and dice, anyone can slice and dice any data to make it beneficial for them. So just be mindful of it's not as simple as it sounds. No. So that's the thing, is that it's never as simple as it sounds. Trust me, if a program is saying that they will guarantee a certain score or your money back, there's a series of things that you have to do in order to do that. So, and you also have to be careful, because the language is on a lot of those, on most of them, is they put a number out there, but they say if you're starting above a certain number. If not, then it's just a score increase. So be very, very skeptical about that. You won't have that problem with us. We don't actually believe in any of that, because it's all just really good, really good marketing is what it comes down to. So, kudos for others trying. But at the end of the day, it is not credible, is what it comes down to. Despite the claims that they will put and the research they'll put out, it's very easy to, very, very easy. Trust me on this. I know, very easy to paint the picture that you want to paint, right? Companies do this all the time, just in life in general, right? Like, we guarantee that you're going to be satisfied with your cell service. And it's like, okay, your cell service isn't great. You have horrible data coverage or whatever it might be. And then you call them and they're like, well, it's all that. So that's that. More than happy to have a conversation though with you, Alana. Figure out what's right for you and take it from there. So schedule some time. Let's have that combo for sure. Other questions about the structure of the exam, let us know in the chat as well, or any questions that you have so far that have popped into your minds. Let us know. So I'd love to hear them. Second part of all this, as far as, we got the sections, but then we have to start thinking about what the core skills are that the MCAT's actually testing you on. And this is listed on the AAMC's website. The AAMC are the folks that write the MCAT and administer the MCAT. So there are these 4 skills: the knowledge of scientific concepts and principles, scientific reasoning about the design and execution of research, and data-based and statistical reasoning. Now, these are the 4 core skills. There are sub-skills, right, in each of these. I won't go through those now, because that's not going to benefit you today. But the key for you to recognize here is these are the critical thinking skills that they are testing you on, plain and simple. So where this is going, as far as your prep is concerned, is the following statement. And that is that you are required to know content in order to be able to take the MCAT. In fact, you are expected to know content and to know the content when taking the MCAT, which means, write this down, never forget this, you will never be rewarded simply for knowing content. There's a false sense of security, and I say this, with a smile on my face, because I want you to all do well, but there's a false sense of security that students kind of build for themselves, where they're just reviewing content all day and thinking, oh, I know this stuff really well. And then they go take some practice questions, they take a full-length exam, and they don't do well. And they say, why didn't I do well? I knew all this content. Because the MCAT doesn't reward you for knowing content. They reward you for being able to use the content that you know, and then they're testing you on these core skills. So in fact, every single question on the exam in the 3 science sections, we'll talk about cars separately here in a second, every question is at the intersection of some topic area and one of these 4 skills, or the subset of these skills. So that's really where you're being tested, is you're being tested at that intersection. So they'll have a question about Gibbs free energy, but you're also being tested about how the design of the experiment that they explained to you was maybe flawed in being able to measure the Gibbs free energy. That's just a random example. Moral of the story is, as you go through your own preparation and your own training and really kind of your shift as far as your mindset, right, as we're kind of dissecting this exam, you have to be thinking about, okay, not only is there the content, but what else is it that I am going to need to be aware of? What else is it that I'm going to need to kind of focus on and be looking at as far as these content areas are concerned, in addition, these core skills that they're ultimately going to be testing me on. So that's part of your training is really practicing those kind of the development of these skills. And that's where your critical thinking skills start to come to play, right? So when we talk about scientific reasoning, we talk about reasoning about an exam, about a execution of research, or the design about research, and statistical reasoning, right? That's reading charts, that's reading tables. That's key. That is where medicine effectively lies. In a weird way, we just did a podcast that we'll be putting out a little bit later on in the next week or so. Just recorded this actually today. In that, the way I put it, and I think it's quite appropriate, is as you're preparing to study for the MCAT, you're really preparing for studying in medical school, right? The skill set that is necessary, and the reason why all of this is there, is because medical schools want to see that you are ready to undertake what is going to be required of you in the medical school curriculum, and quite frankly, as a practicing physician. And I'll paint this example for you. Would you like it if your doctor, you go to your doctor, you're like, I'm not really feeling well, I've got this, fever, I've got this rash, and your doctor says, oh, okay, I know what the answer is, but they don't actually tell you what to do about it? Would we be happy campers? Would we want to go back to that physician? Probably not, right? So that's probably not going to be, a great kind of experience that you're going to ultimately have. It's the same thing with the MCAT, right? It's not good enough for you to just know something. You need to show how you're able to actually apply it, right? And put it into practice. So developing these skills is actually the beginning of your development for the skills that will be necessary for you for the MCAT is really what it comes down to. So that's going to be an important part of this. That is going to be the big key. Alan asked a question as far as free. We love free and low cost sources that we'd recommend to take advantage of. Love that you asked that question, and here's the reason why. 25 years ago, when I started in working with MCAT students, content was not free, right? I mean, that was it was the 2000s. We thought the world was advanced at that point, and the world's obviously advanced even more so. Content wasn't free. You had to go to the library. That was how you get free content, is go to the library, physically go to the library, not Google it online. You had to go buy books, right? I mean, you had to acquire information. In fact, in the old days, the way that schools, universities would kind of show their prestige is by saying how many books they had in their libraries, right? So we have a collection of 8 million volumes, and that meant that their students who were paying tuition fees at their school had access to those 8 million volumes, or whatever it might be. The world has changed. Content is completely free. So as far as content review, you've got Wikipedia, which is awesome. You've got YouTube videos. You've got Khan Academy, right? You can get content review. You don't need a teacher just telling you that PV equals nRT, right? That doesn't matter anymore. What you do need is a teacher to maybe explain to you how PV equals nRT, why it works, and how you can manipulate it, and how you use it to your advantage, and how you develop the problem-solving skills to know when to use which formula, et cetera, right? Is this Charles's law? Is it Boyle's law? Like that might be, that might be a part of it, or needs to be a part of it. But as far as the actual content is concerned, like, that information's out there. Similarly, the AMC, the people who write the MCAT, have free resources available. They also have paid resources available. But they do have free resources available. Their paid resources are reasonably priced, right? They're not free. But if you have fee assistance, or you're part of the fee assistance program, you can get those resources for free as well. So that's another thing. Apply for the fee assistance program and see if you qualify for those free resources. Similarly, though, it's from the perspective of the stuff that is free from the AMC. AMC is in my opinion, the best resource to go to, because it is from the actual test maker, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect test. I have great respect for the AMC. I have great respect for all the test makers out there. Nobody will ever make a perfect test, but as far as practice materials are concerned, that's going to be the best kind of resource for you that's out there. I would caution you, to be fair, against the free practice tests that are available from the prep course organizations, namely because they are used as a marketing lead, right? So that's how they get you into the system. You go, oh, I want to take this practice test, and then you get the number. Even if the score is an accurate reflection, now you are, that's what the purpose of the tool is. Our mentality here is very different, right? Med school headquarters, we're all about giving stuff away for free, right? So we've got a lot of free stuff is what it comes down to. That's why we've got podcasts, we've got events like this. So, and more to come as the days go on. So, that's, I think, some good places to start as far as free resources, at least for kind of the beginnings of things, as it were. Alana, am I opposed to using the Miles Downkey deck? I'm going to be frank. I know everybody loves it. I'm not going to try to convince people to not love it, but it goes back to the statement I made earlier on. The idea of Anki and spaced repetition, absolutely brilliant, absolutely necessary. Spaced repetition, the idea of going back to the same material in a different context or different approach, hugely, hugely important for score improvement on this exam. But the problem that you run into with like idly doing something like, the Miles Downkey deck, again, nothing wrong with it, is that the best use of your time? So I'll actually get on my soapbox here for a second. You have a test date. We all have a test date, right? That's the day that we're going to take the exam, and we have today, right? So from here to here is where we're going. And so you have a finite amount of time. You've got between, clinical obligations, if you're doing research, right, extracurriculars, general community service. If you're in school, I know summer's coming, so a little lighter, but during the school year, you've got school, you've got family, you've got friends, you need to sleep, you need to eat, right? You have a lot of things that are vying for your time. So the time that you're going to dedicate for your MCAT prep, that needs to be you need to be firing at all cylinders, and at the same time, you need to be maximizing it. You don't want to just be idly doing things. And then there's that false sense of security. Students are like, oh, but I'm doing all this. Actually, I had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with a student who had taken the MCAT and said, I don't know why I didn't do well. And I did all the Anki decks. And I was like, is that all you did? And she's like, yeah, that's all I did. I was like, well, that's why, because you didn't go about it in the holistic approach, right? You got to tackle the content, but you also need to tackle the other side of things. So that's my bit on that. So yes, use it. It's good, but don't get obsessed by it, because there's a lot of other things that you need to be working on as it comes as you go through. So we've talked about the structure of the exam. We've talked about these skills, and I wanted to kind of shift gears here to talk about what's really being assessed. I kind of alluded to this as far as your training yourself for how you're going to be studying in medical school. But really what's being assessed is this very simple formula. And I left it kind of open at the bottom there, because this is where I'm going to suggest an exercise for you. So you can draw this on your books, take a screenshot, do whatever you want. Or draw this in your notes. So for a physician comes into an exam room with prior knowledge. Who would agree with that statement, right? So you mean when you go see your doctor, right, they walk into the exam room with prior knowledge, right? They've learned a lot of stuff in med school. They have taken continuing medical education courses. They've seen thousands of patients, right? They have this prior knowledge. You, as the patient, bring new information, right? Because they know all this stuff from before, but then you've got your information. So they either, I don't know, order blood work, or they take your blood pressure, they take your temperature, they take your blood oxygen levels, right? They weigh you, they see how tall you are. It's how you know you're getting a little older. I went to the doctor and they hadn't taken my height, they hadn't measured my height, and they tell me what my height is. I was like, no, that's not my height. Like I'm taller than that. And the nurse looked at me and she goes, maybe with shoes on. So apparently I've started shrinking, which is quite exciting, is what it is. Something for everybody to look forward to. I was then told that happens to you after a certain age that starts with number 4 on it. So moral of the story is you provide all this new information, right? It's like, here you go. Here's this new information. And what the doctor's job is to marry the two bits together, right? Take the prior knowledge that they have, take the information that they've gotten from you, whatever your symptoms are, right? That might say, okay, like you're not feeling well, your stomach hurts. What did you eat last night or last week? Or what, where have you been, right? Have you been traveling abroad? Like what could have caused it? So they get all this new information from you and they put the two together and start making deductions, right? Just like a detective would make deductions, right? They'll start ruling things out. They'll say, okay, well, we know that it's not this because I know this about you and I know this would have to be true in order for it to be the case, right? They might, I don't know, see if they do a culture and they're like, well, okay, there's no bacteria present, so we know that it's not this, right? They start doing that kind of detective deduction work. They make inferences and they start to draw conclusions. This is all critical thinking, right? Connecting the two bits of information together, the prior knowledge and the new information, bringing those two together and reasoning out what the diagnosis is, right? What is it that's actually going on with you? And then once they've come up with the diagnosis, figuring out what the course of action is going to be, right? Is it a prescription for a medication? Is it therapy? Is it, changing the environment in which you live in, right? Maybe you keep sneezing. Well, it's because you haven't vacuumed in 2 months or 3 months or whatever it might be. So it's their job to kind of figure out that diagnosis, and your job as a patient to then go make sure that you're following through on the diagnosis. The same exact thing is true for the MCAT. The difference here is you go into the test with your prior knowledge from your practice questions that you've been doing, from your content review, right? From memorizing formulas, memorizing reactions, memorizing processes, memorizing, oxidative phosphorylation, memorizing the steps of glycolysis, right? Memorizing all those things. And then the MCAT in the form of passages gives you new information, right? They literally will give you a passage, oftentimes on something that you've never seen before, but you have the language, right? You have the tools in order to be able to interpret what is being said in that passage. And then it's your job to use the questions as thing that's the diagnosis that they're asking for, is the questions, and putting your prior knowledge along with information that's in the passage, the right information, to be able to reason out a diagnosis. In this case, the reasoning out of the diagnosis is an answer choice. So the skill is literally the exact same thing. That's why the MCAT exists, because they are seeing, based on where you're at now in your educational career, how well you're able to put these two together. Someone mentioned, I will find it here in a second, Camille mentioned, I think it was Camille, that you're an attorney. So Camille, I got good news for you. If you've gone to law school, you've done this, right? You've done this critical thinking ad nauseum at this point, because there's lots of logical reasoning that occurs in law school and such. So good on you is what it comes down to. You'll have that leg in this process. Don't rest on your laurels, but it's definitely something that is going to show up again, as it were, on this exam. So that's kind of where we're at as far as this assessment, like why this exists and how they're actually testing. I mean, point of today was to talk about like the anatomy of the MCAT, like what's really being assessed. This is what's being assessed. This is the core of it. The CAR section, that's why I kept saying we'll talk about the CAR section in a second. The CAR section takes it one step further. where there is no prior knowledge. So all of the information is new. And it's only the new information that you're able to use in order to be able to draw the diagnosis, to draw the conclusions, and to find the right answer choices. So here's my advice to you. The good news is the skills that you need to develop in order to perform well on the car section are also the skills that you will need to develop for the other three sections. The other three sections then add in the science. So focus on cars, especially early on. Focus on cars to make sure that you are in fact developing those skills, because there is no content that you can fall back on in the car section. Okay, so that is something that is, I think, important for you to, to keep in mind, be mindful of, is as it were, as you're as it goes through. Okay, so that's the key as far as all those pieces. Which leads me to some terminology. So we're going to do a little learning, if you will. Has anyone heard of Bloom's taxonomy? I'm sure if you haven't heard of it directly, you've been exposed to it in some capacity or another. But Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchy of how we are assessed and how we learn, and kind of the different levels of understanding. So this goes in kind of from top down. It's going from like most basic to the most complex. So when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the first level is the level that's referred to as the remember level, sometimes referred to as recall and recognition, right? Do I remember that this is a book, right? Do I remember that this is a pen? Do I remember that this is a table? The second part of that, of course, is, do I understand that this is a table? So it's not just about me seeing a table and knowing that it's a table, but I understand that it's a table and I can explain it to somebody else because I can, rest a dish on top of it, for instance. I'm using the table example. The third level up is your ability to then apply what you remember and what you understand to a new situation. Right. So in the example of the table, you're able to say, okay, I can now say I can make a different sized table to fit into a space that, can't accommodate a bigger table. Right. So you're able to actually apply your knowledge, as it were. Fourth level is the ability to analyze, right? And the ability to actually do a kind of deep dive into why the table is a table, right? What materials has it been made out of? What materials can we not make the table out of, right? What materials, or what, can we have a table with 5 legs versus 3 legs versus 2 legs? Like, could you have a 2-legged table? Probably not, right? It won't be a very balanced table. So that's the like next level up. And then you go into the evaluation stage where you're able to kind of at the next higher level, you're able to evaluate whether one table is better than another table. And then the way you have kind of mastered things is your ability to then yourself create a table. Okay? And I'm using the table as the example here. So this is what Bloom's taxonomy is telling us. For the purposes of the MCAT, pretty much the remember and understand is assumed. So they're not going to reward you for that. Okay? The apply and analyze, that's where the MCAT, that's the meat of where the MCAT is in fact going to be testing you. So really, as you kind of think about what your responsibility is, it's these 2 apply and analyze levels of Bloom's taxonomy. That's the level, and that's a pretty high level, to be fair, when it comes to the MCAT. That's where you're really being kind of core tested and need to have kind of core focus, is that application and analysis of questions and of passages and of content and of information. So how this relates to what you've seen as undergrads, and tell me if this was you, but when you're taking organic chemistry and you're in lab, do you really truly, as you're going through OChem and you've been learning all this new information, it's been thrown at you, relatively quickly, do you truly understand what's going on in the lab? And my guess is you probably didn't, right? But you could follow the directions and you could get that yield, write the lab report, figure it out afterwards. But as you were actually doing the lab, it may not have been, as apparent why you were doing things. That's an example of applying the knowledge that you've learned in the book, right? So you go in the lab and you actually do the material, you do the analysis. But when you come back to it for the MCAT, now you're revisiting that analysis and that application. And you need to make sure that you are training yourself to really, really be solid of not just, I know this, but I can explain it to somebody else, right? That's actually a really good test, is if you can explain something to someone else, that means you become pretty darn good at it. So for the purposes of the MCAT, this is the level that you're going to. For the purposes of your MCAT preparation, and this is where I'm going to kind of mix it up here, if you will, you're going to add in this next layer of the evaluate. And that evaluation comes after you have taken questions and done practice tests, where you are going through and now analyzing and evaluating your own performance, right? What is it that I did to get this question correct? What is it that I did that got me this question wrong? How do I change this the next time? What do I need to do in order to fix this, right? Why did I get it wrong? What do I do to fix it? On a standardized exam, plain and simple, there are 3 wrong answer choices, on a standardized exam with 4 answer choices, like the MCAT, there are 3 that are wrong, and there's 1 that's right, and the 3 that are wrong for a reason, right? You are deliberately being thrown red herrings, right? You're deliberately being thrown curveballs. They are trying to trick you, trap you into choosing one of those incorrect answers. It's in fact harder to write when you're writing exam questions. It's harder to write incorrect answers than it is to write correct answers, because you got to make sure that the incorrect answer is a good incorrect answer, one that will, that will be attractive to students. When you are on a standardized exam, you make 2 mistakes when you get something wrong. You rejected the correct answer, and you justify to yourself that the wrong answer was in fact correct. So as you go through your own preparation and you're evaluating your own performance, you need to be asking yourself, what did I do, right? What is it that got me here? But you also want to do this with questions that you got right, right? The questions you got right, you don't know, maybe you just guessed and you got it right. Or more importantly, could you have gotten it correct in a faster fashion, right? Could you have taken less time, but still gotten the question correct, right? Especially if you start to see, okay, I'm spending 5 minutes, but I got this question right. How do I get it correct in 1 minute? Because I've got 58 other questions that I need to be working on. So these are the things that you have to look at and you have to consider as you're working through these pieces. So really, really kind of key for you as you think about kind of how all of this is going to fit together as far as the taxonomy or as far as the hierarchy is concerned. So Bloom's taxonomy helps us kind of think about that in that fashion. Similarly, with building your skills, if we think about, remember I said you're starting here and you're ending here. If we think about kind of your MCAT prep journey as you're going through this process of studying, when you're early on, you're over on the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to be spending more time on content review and developing your critical thinking skills. But that amount of investment in those areas needs to diminish over time, because you're going to start to increase your application and practice and building your endurance skills, right? Those are the skills that you're going to want to start increasing. The last thing you want to be doing is taking a full-length exam on day 1, right? Aside from taking a diagnostic exam, but you don't want to take a diagnostic exam, then 2 weeks later, take another full-length exam, and then take another full-length exam, and take another full-length exam, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be absolutely key for you, as it were. So keep that in mind. S asked a question: how can we dissect or simplify passages and questions? Because I find that I'm getting lost by the complex wording. You're not alone, so that's the good news. You're not alone. The way to really break it down is to read for purpose. And when I say read for purpose, I mean read the passage. As you're reading the passage, look and see, why is it that the author wrote that first paragraph? Why did they write the second paragraph? Why did they write the third paragraph? Don't allow yourself to get bogged down in the details, right? If the author is writing about a certain era of literature and then starts listing off examples, you don't care what the examples are. You haven't necessarily, I mean, maybe you have, but they're not expecting that you've read those books. All that was there in that paragraph was that the author gave examples of literature that fall into this category of, I don't know, 1800s literature, whatever it might be, right? So that way you're not getting stuck in that actual wording. With the science sections, it's the same story, right? They're going to say, we added 0.3 microliters to 0.6 microliters of acid, and then waited for 30 minutes at 45 degrees Celsius, and like give you all these little details. That doesn't matter. What matters is they gave you the procedures for the experiment in that paragraph. When you get to the question will then say, according to the passage, the procedure for, or according to the passage, what may have been flawed in the procedure for the experiment? You say, okay, I know that's in paragraph, I don't know, number 2. What was flawed was that they ran it at too high of a temperature. They denatured the protein. I don't, for it. I'm just giving examples here. So that's how you simplify the passages, is you read for the purpose of each paragraph. Don't get bogged down in the actual details. Your job is not to read a passage and then come and give a dissertation defense level talk about it. Your job is to read the passage, then go to the questions, and then use the questions to figure out if you need to go back, where you need to go back to in the passage in order to be able to extract the information that you're going to need as it were. Chloe, how often should we be taking full-length exams when studying? You feel fatigued when taking you feel fatigued after a 7.5-hour exam? I'm surprised. No, I'm being sarcastic. So full-length exams are super long. They are exhausting. Generally speaking, you're going to want to take between 5 and 6 full lengths at most between now and when you take the exam, right? So, I think the question I have for you is, or for anybody, is when are you taking the exam, right? Because you want to kind of space that accordingly. General good advice is about once per week in the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to the exam. That way you kind of get in a rhythm of things. Before that, maybe 1, 2, or 3 weeks before you start the once per weeks. And then your first full length after you've taken your diagnostic should be kind of at your halfway point. So if you're studying, let's say, for 4 months, you're starting today, you're testing in 4 months, your halfway point, 2 months from now is when you take the first full length exam. Don't go and just start taking full length exams. There's an urban legend out there that taking full length exams is good for score improvement, and it's true that taking full length exams is good for score improvement. But the only reason why it's good is if you go and actually spend time reviewing them. You got to go and review them and analyze them. So if you don't do that step, then it's not worth taking them. So that's the key. Adeline, yes, there is highlighting functionality on the exam. You'll get a notepad where you can take notes. You can't annotate the text, but you can highlight the text. And then similar with the answer choices. All of those mechanics, I will direct you to the AAMC's website, because they give all the details plus any updates that may have happened, right? Because it's a live thing, so that's the so I would say go there. And depending on when you're testing, of course, if you're not testing this year, make sure that you familiarize yourself with that once that happens. It's not a ridiculous question. It's a good question to have. But yes, you do have the ability to take notes, essentially, as it were. Irene, as far as reading faster and completing the passages without the accuracy, there's 2 parts for that. One, you need to train yourself to be able to read and extract information faster and faster. So I would say scientific journals, or even, for the car section, articles from reputable sources. So I'm not endorsing any one newspaper, but like the New York Times or the New Yorker. It's very New York themed or centric, but that level of writing, not the BuzzFeed article or right, like this the quick article that you might read. Yahoo News. I mean, that's so. I don't even know if there is a Yahoo News anymore, right? So like more in-depth writing and practicing that extraction of information. As I said, the key is to get accurate before you try to go fast. So build your accuracy and then build up your speed. The example I like to use, because I think it's somewhat relatable, is darts. Right, I'm not a dart player. I think I've played darts maybe 5 or 10 times in my life at most. But professional dart players, I mean, they're pretty accurate and they're pretty fast. But they didn't start that way, right? They started by very slowly throwing the darts, taking time and training themselves until they got to a point where they could execute on it relatively quickly. So you're in that same boat in the sense that you want to be practicing things accordingly. So something to keep in mind. I mentioned this earlier. We now have test prep. This QR code, if you want to schedule a time to meet one-on-one with me to go through kind of what, where you're at, where your plan is, feel free to use it. So grab that code. And then if you're in the application cycle, same thing, but if you want to meet with one of the admissions advisors that we have on our team, that's what that QR code is for. You can also find all this information on our website, so just something to keep in mind. But I'll open it up to questions, and really I wanted to get through those slides to get to the question slide. But I'll open it up to questions to see what questions it is that you have before we wrap up. So we got about 5 minutes left or so. So fire away, ask the questions that you've got, and we'll take it from there. I do have to say, I was looking at the introduction chat here real quick, and Obed started off by saying, I'm 31, a little iffy on whether I should continue as far as age. And Kira, I loved your answer. If you're alive, you aren't too old, and I agree with that statement. Is what it comes down to. A friend of mine at one point, a couple months ago, says to me, goes, it was his wife, said, "How do we get so old?" And I said, "Well, we woke up every morning, right? That's how it is." So it's that's what it is. So it is never too late. It is never too late for sure. Questions that you have. How do I feel about UWorld? I mean, it's a great resource. It's the question bank is phenomenal. So a lot of students use it. I will go back to say that the key is you got to find resources that are going to work for you, right? That's the that's the key. So Anna, you may have answered your own question just now when you said, "I'm running out of time with my subscription. Is it worth renewing?" If you're asking that question, I will ask you this question: have you been using it? And if the answer is yes, well, what do you think? Is it worth renewing? 2, if the answer is you haven't been using it, then I would ask, why haven't you been using it? So, is it because of other obligations that you've had, or you just haven't been attracted to go and use it? Is what it is. So, not related to UWorld, but I was using Duolingo last year, and I loved it. I thought Duolingo was great. I did not renew my subscription because I got very, very busy. I didn't have time, but I will renew my subscription. So I think that's also a question, right? Like similar, like, is it that if you have time, you would be doing it? Elise, we spoke the other day. How in depth should you go? You should go really in depth, right? I mean, you should go really in depth. You got to go through and you got to see what why you got things right, why you got things wrong, identify what the content areas were so that you can start identifying patterns and figure out what it is that you need to be working on as far as that areas are concerned. As far as cars goes, I mean, unfortunately, there's no like magic pill that I could give you in a session like this. But the key, as far as cars, is to again be reading for purpose. Like that is the key. Shri, the cost for 101 MCAT tutoring varies depending on the number of hours that you get. We are priced lower than the big box because we're not a big corporation trying to meet a big corporate number is what it comes down to. So all the information's on the website. I'll leave that over to you. The way the sessions are designed, basically there are packages that you can get, so 10, 20, 30, 40 hours. The way the sessions are designed as far as the duration per session is you can either schedule a 60-minute or 90-minute appointment with your teachers, with your tutors. You could do 30, but there's kind of this educational flaw with 30-minute tutoring because by the time you get started, the time is up, right? It's like you need more time than that. As far as frequency, that's up to you, right? Depending on when you're testing and how much tutoring you need. So we'll figure that out with you. So it's not like it's every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. It can be every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, but it's not the case there. If you're planning on taking the MCAT in 2027, you would start preparing for the MCAT if you're testing in March of 27. You would ideally start either in the fall of 2026 or potentially in the summer of 2026, depending on what your schedule is. But first things first, obviously review the content, but take the pre-med courses as well. So that's a question to take that into account. So set up a time, we can talk and figure out what the right steps are for you. As far as high-level conclusions on passages and develop higher order thinking for the difficult MCAT passages or questions. Clarify what you mean by high-level conclusions. You mean if you mean conclusions that require extracting more complexities, that's a matter of practice, right? Like if you need to connect 4 dots together in order to be able to get to your reasoning, that is something that you just have to train yourself to do, and that comes with practice. And that's what some of the harder questions will require you to do, right? I notice that in the passage they said this, and because they said this and they said this, then they couldn't have meant this, so the answer must be answer choice B, right? Like but that does come from practice primarily, and developing those critical thinking skills as you're going through. So that's there. We're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining us. Super happy that you were able to join us for sure. You'll be getting a recording of this, so keep an eye out on your inboxes for that. If you want to set up a time, go to our website. You can set up a time with me. We can talk about what kind of is the right plan that you're going to need in terms of what you need for your MCAT prep. So feel free to do that as you go through. Other than that, have a great rest of your evening, and we'll be doing more of these. So there are going to be, we're going to have lots and lots of these events. So feel free to join us for them. Omid, at the last second, you guys made it just in time. Tips on effectively spending your time on content review. I think this is what I was saying earlier on. Review the content, but practice the application of it at the same time, right? So that's the like summarized version of it, is make sure that you are not just reviewing content, but you're then putting it into actual application, because that will help with the longer term retention, as it were. So yeah, we'll have more of these events. Check out premedevents.com. And we'll be, I think we have another one next week, and then we'll have some more over the summer for sure. Check us out on the Med School Headquarters podcast as well. We'll be launching an MCAT podcast. As I said, we've just recorded a bunch of sessions today, so those will be coming out in the next couple of days. So more to come, as it were. Thanks all. Have a great rest of your evening, and be well.